our Strategy Committee meeting for September 2020. Thank you all for being here. A reminder before I open us with a karakia that we are being live streamed. So tēnā koutou to everybody who's joining us virtually as well. So I'm just going to open us up with a karakia. Kia tau ngā manaakitanga a te mea ngaro. Ki runga te tēnā, ki tēnā o tātou. Kia mahia te hua mākihikihi. Kia toi te kupu, toi te mana, toi te aroha, toi te reo Māori. Kia tūturu, ka whakamaua, kia tina, huie, taiki.
Taiki.
So, morena everybody. Light agenda today. We have got three fantastic looking deputations. So welcome to our guests. We're going to start with Shirley Ayres this morning. So she is representing Kairos Connection Trust and she's speaking to us about housing. Welcome, Shirley. The floor is yours. You have 10 minutes. Thank you.
Morning, everybody. Kia ora. I'm going to be speaking about Kairos Connection Trust. We're a trust based in Kerikeri, and I was pleasantly surprised to see that I've already been speaking to some of your councillors who are Zooming in today. Just a big thank you to Rachel for inviting us to present today. Kim Hammond is going to be handling my presentation, and I've sent through basically my little presentation to you all, so hopefully you've had a chance to have a look at that already. And there was also an article that some of the local newspapers picked up on some of my research. So I'll just make a start, and probably the best way to start is to just explain a little bit about Kairos and our name. Kairos is actually an ancient Greek word meaning the right, critical or opportune moment. It's also the basis of our English word crisis, particularly to provide a kairos or new opportunity for hope after a crisis moment. So next one, please, Kim. And how do we offer hope? We operate a food bank. The Kairos Food Bank was one of the very few food banks operating at COVID level 4 this year. And we've noticed a real rise in increase in the demand for food banks, food parcels. And we've also been very successful with Ministry of Social Development in securing funding to cover that growth. We also offer hope to the Araha Room in Moriwa. We recently we fundraised for a trailer for them, just a practical thing, which was just such a needy thing for them to be able to transport goods and household items, and we supply those for them. We've been collecting bed linen for them this winter, and our people in Kerikeri are just so generously donating towards them. We also collaborate. We're also sited in the same building as the Northern Community Family Service. So they offer a budgeting service. And so the budgeting service works in very closely with our Kairos Food Bank. We also connect with the local drop-in centre, other things that are happening in our building, which is the Kerikeri Baptist Church, who kindly host us. And so they have other programs that kind of reach into the areas in our community of need. So we have mainly music. We have the Kerikeri Baptist Care team that we work with. And we also supply fundraising service to our local tribe youth. And we're also working in with our local counselling service. So next one, please, Kim. So Kairos also has a vision to become involved in part of the answer with the housing crisis. And the latest figures at the moment that I can tell you is that there are 18,000 New Zealanders listed on the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development or Ministry of Social Development's public housing register as being in desperate need of housing. And actually that register is probably underreports the figures in Northland. So it's probably a lot more than that. We have a goal of 200,000 and we currently have just over 30,000 in our seed housing fund, because we really want to make a start at becoming a community housing provider. Next one, please, Kim. And so why do we care? Because we've been here for a number of years and we're watching those on low to medium incomes getting squeezed out of our Northland communities, and particularly Kerikeri. One thing we've noticed is that Kerikeri is a really popular place for wealthy people to retire, which is fabulous, because those are some of the wealthy people who actually like to be involved in contributing towards the needs of the less privileged in our local community. But what's happening is that we're just watching, and I've included a little bit further on just a few examples of situations I've actually come across. And we also want to be partnering with Vision West in Auckland. I know some of you know a little bit about Vision West. They're the government's premium community and transitional, and there's another category called Housing First, housing provider. They've been around for about 20 years, and we've looked at the model that Vision West are working with, and we really like the way they do things, and they've been very, very successful at introducing not just social housing, but community housing with the wraparound services. So at this point, Kairos is operating with a lot of the wraparound services, but we really want the opportunity to become involved as a housing provider. And we have a vision to do that with Vision West mentoring and their help. They've offered to help us and to do everything they can to support us so that we can become a community housing provider. Our nearest community housing is in Whangarei. There's a little bit going on up in Kaitaia with Ricky Houghton. He was actually one of the original Vision West trustees, believe it or not. So we're really excited to be able to, we really have a vision to get involved, either by perhaps investing in some of the housing ourselves or partnering with council or other involved parties. We've had Vision West's housing general manager up to Kerikeri, James Widgery, to advise on possible transitional housing. And we also had a representative from HUD, or Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, but their decision at that time was that government didn't want to do any transitional housing. So, so that was disappointing, which they didn't want to do any transitional housing in Kerikeri. So that was disappointing for Kairos, but it just meant that our focus had to be elsewhere. But since then, of course, we've had COVID, and now government have announced a fund of 350 million to support community housing. So, so this is another opportunity for us to be involved. When James Widgery, of course, also gives advice to housing and urban development. He's on a panel that meets probably about every 6 to 8 weeks. So they collaborate closely with central government as well. And we also introduced James Widgery to Andy Knock of Far North Holdings, and they were very interested to talk with each other. And so we're very excited about being able to partner with Vision West and possibly even another interested party involved with housing. So next one, please, Kim. Who do we care about? So we care about those on low to medium incomes. Like, this is a lady, I've called her Margie, it's not her real name. She's single. She has one adult son who now lives and works out of town. She's 65 plus. She works part-time as an early childhood education teacher, but she's needing to slow down. Her rent at the time I prepared this 6 months ago was $290 per week for a small one-bedroom cottage in Kerikeri, and the rent would be going up soon. Well, since I've written this, the rent has gone up. She's not eligible for accommodation supplement because she has $8,000 in KiwiSaver. So what she's done is taken that $8,000 in KiwiSaver, and she now lives in a caravan. There's also Wendy. Wendy works, next one please, Kim, thanks. Wendy works full-time in admin in one of our Kerikeri pack houses. She's aged 55 plus. She's lived in Kerikeri all of her life. She loves her job. She's very good at what she does and often works long, long hours. She's married to a lovely guy who was on his second time around and has children to his first marriage for whom he faithfully paid maintenance for many years until they grew up. And they were blessed with 2 more children, but that meant that after the rent, food and bills were paid, there was nothing left to save for a deposit on a home of their own. But what happens when they both retire? And what happens when one of them passes away? Next one, please, Kim. And meet Mike. That's not his real name. Mike is a single male aged 45 plus. He's lived and worked in Kerikeri as a writer for 15 years or more. Loves his job, but he has some health issues. He's recently been forced to move out of Kerikeri because his rent went up by 50% and his salary has not kept pace with this. And then there's also Lorraine. Next one, Kim. Lorraine is retired. She's lived in Kerikeri for many years. She's single. She's worked as a volunteer in one of our Kerikeri op shops for a number of years. She has family in Kerikeri, but has recently moved away because her rent went up so high she couldn't afford to stay close by to Whānau. There were no affordable rentals available here. So, is that surprising? And what about our solo mums and dads? Next one, please, Kim. Our solo mums and dads, our working poor in the pack houses. There's about 1,000 people working in our pack houses in Kerikeri, supermarkets and retail sector. Our young couples wanting to get established, young millennials, our elderly who can't afford to move into a retirement village because they don't have a home of their own to sell, to be able to afford that. So, and that gave rise to that little media article that you've already seen. I actually took this picture of the Welcome to Kerikeri sign and photoshopped it a wee bit. So I'll leave that with you and open to your questions.
Thank you, Shirley, for that presentation and for coming along and taking the time to talk with us. Obviously, housing is a massive issue and it's a big conversation happening at a local government New Zealand sector-wide level especially. I'm opening the floor to questions now, so I've got Councillor Foy.
Morena Shirley, thank you so much for your presentation. Housing is something that I'm really interested in as well. And I'm very familiar with the high costs of establishing a house, particularly at, it's now up to probably $3,000 a square metre for a new dwelling, and that's not including the land and on-site servicing. So I'm not sure, the capacity in terms of what the presentation is to the council about. I know that Kerikeri is probably the highest value property area in our district, and there's a lot of other cheaper solutions surrounding the area that would still allow housing options and more people. I wasn't sure if either housing more people was your priority or if having it, as a must-have in Kerikeri was a priority of your organisation, because I noticed that with Housing New Zealand, in particular, really valuable areas like, let's just say, Auckland CBD, they may sell houses there and establish houses where there's cheaper land options, so we can provide more housing. It's just not in a more sought-after area. So I think that's really my relevant 2 questions. How's council involved and what's the priority? Is it housing in Kerikeri or just housing in general?
I would say that, to be perfectly honest, that Kairos would like to make a start actually in Kirikiri to start with. We need to have a starting place, and a really good starting place for us would be either to lease land from council or somebody, or a developer even, or offer the wraparound service and provide all of that for another housing provider. But we ourselves would like to become a housing provider simply because studies have shown that having a roof over somebody's head is having the basics of life, which is a roof, a safe place to dwell, and food in your tummy, is the starting place to be able to fix a lot of other or offer solutions to a lot of other problems that people have that come as part of the poverty package. So that's where the wraparound services come into play. And as far as Vision West goes, I was very impressed with what they were offering, because I used to tutor many years ago, and I used to tutor TOPS training courses. And what I found was that we could offer training, but often our students found it difficult to learn because there were other problems, underlying problems in their lives. And those underlying problems ranged from all sorts of dysfunctionality in their background, and their basic needs were not being met, first of all. So what Vision West have found is that if they're able to meet the basic needs, they've had an 80% success rate at being able to bring other solutions into people's lives so that they can be contributing members of society, basically.
Thanks for that, Shirley. I think there's two matters there. Providing housing is one, and the cost of the housing based on where the housing is a second, because $1 million for a house in Kirikiri is, the standard amount now. And so that land is very valuable. And I am familiar with He Korowai, and they purchased a site in the residential zone to allow the density, to allow the number of housing. So it sounds like you're asking council for land. Is that the basis?
Yeah, I know that other housing providers are working with local councils, and I have actually spoken to some of your councillors about leasing some land from council. That would be one option. We've worked out a finance plan on raising a 20% deposit. We've looked at various different models of houses, and there could be a combination of purchasing low-cost housing. It certainly has to be up to latest specifications and requirements, of course, but it's possible to establish 10 houses as long as the land is there and is available at an affordable lease. It's possible to get that established, and we've done the figures on a scenario, which I'd be happy to send through to you if you like.
Thanks, Shirley. That would be great if you could send that through. Mia Carter.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Shirley. Nice to see you again, Shirley. Thanks for your presentation. I just want to start by saying the criticism I have of Housing Corp is that they're building homes with 4 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms and $600,000, and just quite honestly, it's impossible for a whole lot of our people they're not affordable. So the question I have is, and you mentioned Ricky Houghton, he's an example, he and his group are an example of where they do low-cost housing. They're getting houses, as you may know, from Auckland, transporting them up, renovating them, making them safe, warm, and then also providing an opportunity for the tenants to actually move in and own them. And I've got to say, it's a great concept, and it's the sort of thing that I'd like us to see spread across. And we have been, Sean and I have been working with Ricky to see how we can expand it. So we'd love to work with you in that regard. And I just wondered, in that case, the second thing that I just wanted to ask is the homes that you have in mind, they don't all have to be 4 double bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, I assume. There's tiny homes around that are actually adequate for people to start off with, and I just wondered what your concept is. Thank you.
Well, we don't have we're looking at several different types of housing. We know that it's possible to establish, say, houses at an average of 100 square metres for $100,000 each, just broadly speaking. We also have really good contacts and networks with, we have a designer who's offering his services. He has a Queen's Service Medal or a New Zealand Order of Merit in his services to design. We've had other offers from a retired town planner who you're probably quite familiar with. He's developed a lot of land in Kerikeri and around the mid-north. And so we also have contacts with a lot of people involved in the housing industry, including property developers as well. So we've over the last couple of years, we've had people suggest all sorts of interesting options. But what it would come down to possibly is we need to see where the land is first of all, so that we can design something. And we particularly have people's dignity in mind, because that's essential. But we know it's possible to work with 100 square metres average, say, and also to include environmentally friendly services at low cost. So these are the people that we have access to. The other thing that I've found really exciting is that when you say social housing, I know that there's been a lot of backlash because people in Kerikeri, all of a sudden they have the stereotype of a bunch of thugs living in a house that they can't get rid of, and they're causing problems. But with the Vision West model and with the wraparound services that you're offering, those problems tend to be dealt with. Those problems tend to be preempted, and people's lives are turned around. So one of the things they have is they want to see transformed communities and transformed lives as well. They also operate a mixed model. So a mixed model means that they would have perhaps half of their homes offered to Ministry of Social Development for people wanting to get off the public housing register, and then half of their homes would be offered to people who are actually working in the local community at low cost. So that's what they call a mixed model.
Thank you, Shirley. That's what Ricky Houghton does, the wraparound services. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Your Worship. Shirley, again, thank you for joining us. We will discuss this later as a committee as to how we might like to progress this for the district in terms of your presentation. So again, thank you for coming.
Okay.
It was lovely to see you.
Thank you. Where do I send the spreadsheet through to, Rachel?
Just send it through to Kim, where you sent the other presentations through to the same place.
Oh, Aisha, is it?
Aisha, yes.
Aisha,
that would be great.
okay.
Thank
I'll have
you.
to do a little bit of work on it because that was for a specific property that we were thinking of buying.
No problems.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Great. Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure. Lovely to see you.
Thank you.
Before we move on to our next deputation, apologies to everybody. I didn't move that we had an apology from Councillor Collard. So before we move on, I'd just like to move that apology. Can I get a seconder, please?
I'll second that. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Tipanea. All in favour? Aye.
Aye.
Carried. Thank you. So now we'll move on to Donald Chandler. So Donald has a presentation for us around mobility and urban planning. Welcome, Donald.
Oh, thanks, Rachel. And if you can indulge me just ever so slightly, I might be 11 or 12 minutes, but I'm going to cover 80 years in that time. So hopefully we can make that happen. I'm not going to follow the presentations exactly. This will be a little different. Way out in 2100.
Me?
I think Donald has apologised in advance that you might drop out every for 3 or 4 seconds at a time. So we just need to fill in the gaps a little bit. Is that right, Donald?
Yes, it is. Have I dropped out?
No, you're back again. So carry on. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to start out all the way out in 2100, which obviously is not like 2020. We all know that. But a lot of people picture it as being sort of like 2020 on steroids. They think their mobile phone battery will last a year, that their internet will be faster, and that the roads will be wider and smoother. I think that's a mistake. I think 2100 is going to be fundamentally different. It's going to be strange, almost alien to us. And how do I know that? Or why do I think that? It's because looking forward 80 years, instead let's look backwards 80 years. Let's go back to 1940. It's barely recognizable to our kids. There are 0 transistors. The first is still 7 years away. There's no internet. There are no solar panels. Phone calls are clunky and expensive. And it's not just technology, it's socially too. There are no LGBTQ pride parades. People mostly eat natural and local. Wasabi Doritos are not a thing. Jews are treated like an infestation and exterminated, and sadly, basically nobody cares. Closer to home, Te Reo Maori is literally beaten out of our school children. Economically, things are slower and simpler, and far less globally interconnected. And that's just going back for 80 years, but we all know that the pace of change isn't constant, it's accelerating. So for a comparison, maybe we should go back twice as far, 160 years, to 1860. Average lifespan was 40 years. You could basically choose between a filthy, disease-ridden city with typhoid or scratching out a living farming by hand. I honestly doubt any of us would have lasted a month in 1860. We'd say or do the wrong thing or just die of disease or exhaustion. And I think 2100 is going to feel just about as alien to us as that. It's really hard for that reason to have a specific crystal ball, but we can have some fun. That will travel door to door, any 2 places on Earth for cheaply and routinely. It will take less than 6 hours. We won't emit a single net gram of CO2 to do that. In fact, I think travel throughout the solar system will be routine in 2100. Cows and sheep, basically gone. The 3 waters, not an issue. Kids going to school from age 5 to 20, a distant memory. And here's an interesting one. Money, which I think is currently based on the notion of material scarcity, gets repurposed. Essentially, it becomes a way that people vote on what's worth doing and what's not. And so I think I just said something that's a little bit freaky, maybe, based on the notion of material scarcity, kind of implying that scarcity or want goes away in 2100. And I think that's a future newsflash that to a good degree it probably will. And we shouldn't be surprised by that because it's really just a continuation of a trajectory that we've been on for decades or possibly even centuries or millennia. And it may not seem that way in 2020 when we're talking about housing shortages and droughts and food poverty and all the terrible things that we're experiencing right now. But I want to talk science for a minute, because science tells us some things that are maybe not so obvious, but they're definitely true. Stuff, whether it's food or cars or houses or factories or roads or rockets or robots, it's all made of atoms. And atoms are incredibly abundant, okay? There's no shortage of atoms in the universe or even in the world, okay? We have all the things we need: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, which is what we're made of, what food is made of, all living things. Even non-living things like cars and computers. There's tons of iron and aluminium, silicon, lithium. Gold is admittedly a bit scarce, but in the future we'll be able to mine asteroids, and precious metals like gold and platinum are abundant and concentrated in asteroids. A small one, 1 kilometer in diameter, could have $5 trillion worth of metals, $5 trillion. So, I repeat, we have all the atoms we need to make all the stuff we want for a long, long time. And so you're saying to yourself, well, why aren't we all rich then, Don, if you're right? Why is there hunger and want? Why are there damp, crowded houses? And that's because atoms are only one part of what I call the holy trinity of stuff, okay? Another part of that holy trinity is energy. And so the problem we have right now is that we have lots of atoms, but they aren't arranged in a terribly useful way. That carbon we need is sitting in a lump of coal, or even worse, it's bound up with oxygen in the atmosphere as molecules of CO2. Hydrogen and oxygen, they're stuck together as water. Iron and aluminium, they're sitting in ores at relatively low concentrations. And so what do we need to rip these molecules apart and rearrange them and put them back together into useful stuff? We need energy. And if we want to be climate conscious, we need clean energy, basically electrical energy from clean, renewable sources. If we want to do a lot of that rearranging and recombining, we need an abundance of this cheap, clean, renewable energy. And unfortunately, we don't have right now this item 2 of our holy trinity of stuff. But there's good news. It's coming. Okay? Solar energy costs have come down 80% in the past decade, projected to decline another 70% in the next decade. Wind power costs also continue to plunge, and batteries, which make up for when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, while they're still fairly expensive, they're actually dropping fastest of all. So we're on the cusp of having this second part of the holy trinity of stuff, energy, taken care of. Okay? And if you look out to 2100, it is taken care of. In fact, what's going to happen is that the intermittent nature of solar and wind means we're going to wind up with a super abundance of energy. We're going to have, in order to build an adequate supply for the calmer, cloudier days, we're going to have to overbuild wind and solar. And on most days, we're going to have way more than we need of this cheap, clean power. And we're going to have to come up with uses for that. We might desalinate ocean water. We might suck CO2 back out of the atmosphere. We might pump water back up our hydroelectric dams for another go. We might make hydrogen or even food. Okay? And so I just said another odd thing, making food from surplus electricity. And now you're probably thinking, get real, Don, come on, food is grown. It's plants, it's cows, it's chickens, that sort of thing. Far North's economy is all about growing food. Okay? You don't just Shazam some electricity and magically get food. And I claim you actually do. Okay? But it's not magic. It's about knowing how. And that brings me to the third part of my holy trinity of stuff, the knowing how part. This is the most important part. I call this part patterns, and it's kind of a shorthand I use for a lot of different stuff we do, directing energy to make our
Donald, I think we've lost you a bit stronger this time.
Lucky, I thought that was my internet.
Donald, we've got you back.
I'm looking forward to better internet in 2100.
Where did you lose me? Where did you lose me, Rachel?
Just after patterns.
Okay, so I'll just pick up about where we were. So humanity knows a lot of patterns already, and we're developing more and better ones all the time. We never really develop worse ones, and if we do, they get abandoned or shot down. So you might feel a light bulb moment coming on right now, which is to say to yourself, wait a minute, if atoms are already abundant, and the energy to direct those atoms to do useful things is about to become superabundant, where is the future value chain? And I'm going to claim that the future of value is all about developing new and improved patterns, okay? And so where do new and improved patterns come from? Well, the neat thing is they come from the minds of people. And that's really good because what we've talked about so far is kind of mechanistic, and we ought to like have a focus on people. Hey, tangata, hey, tangata, hey, tangata, sort of a way of looking at the world, okay? And I think that's true. And while we're supplemented by machines increasingly in developing these new great patterns for doing new wonderful things, for a long time to come, I think humans are going to sit at the top of this pattern creating value chain. So that brings me to our district. If we want our district to participate and thrive and be sort of global equals in participating in future value, what we really need, even more than we need a spatial plan, is we need a people plan, okay? I think priority number one, our top level strategy looking out to 2100 is a people plan that's going to ensure that we have right here an abundance of creators and innovators, okay? But we're in already a global competition for these sorts of people. We're not the only ones that want that abundance, okay? And that means that our plans here need to go hard and go early, you've heard that before, on three pillars, which are to retain, develop, and attract these creators and innovators. There's lots and lots of components to such a plan. I think one component rises to the level of being a priority number two, and that's to have great places. We know that work from anywhere was already happening, and COVID has given it a huge boost. Okay, if people can work from anywhere, they're going to choose to live in the great places. Okay, now we've got tremendous potential here for that in the far north. Some of it relates to our natural surroundings, but a lot of it relates to our built environment that we have to, improve and extend. Okay, what we need to do is we need to picture who creators and innovators are and what they look like and where they congregate. And I don't want to stereotype too much or be negative, but this means that we can't be dominated by retirement villages, and we can't carry on being Squaresville, where developers decide for us that everyone lives in a nuclear family, 3 bedrooms, 2-car garage on a section somewhere out there in an ever-increasing sprawl, okay? So to come back to 2020, we need to start becoming leading edge, and that means we need to start looking and acting leading edge. We need our schools to embrace future-focused learning. We need towns that project vibrancy and optimism day and night. We need places that cater more to people and less to cars, that foster physical and mental health and person-to-person connections, because those are essential to innovation and quality of life. And we need to develop differently. We need to say it's enough with insular retirement villages, enough with the sprawl of something like orangutan river estates. If we do more of the same, we're going to get more of the same. And so now I'm right back to patterns of development, okay? We have obsolete development patterns and they're squelching innovation. Instead, what if we thought more about CBD infill, apartments, denser, walkable, low car or even no car development in Kerry, maybe at the Bing property or the Mackenzie farm? What about transitioning our existing suburban residential streets to traffic-calmed, walkable, mixed-use neighborhoods, interconnected by riverside bike paths? And then we have to ask ourselves, and maybe this relates to our previous presentation, if it's all too hard, it's all too built out, it's all too expensive to retrofit, there's too many conservatives and NIMBYs throwing up roadblocks, maybe we need to think about some ambitious greenfields developments. I've got my eye on a little triangle that is made by Kerikeri, Kaikoai, and Kawakawa, and that sort of centers somewhere around the state highway near Oromahoi. What if we started some sort of a new, modern, attractive to innovators and creators greenfields development there? Maybe we start by anchoring it with a university or a research head up with Auckland rents. So just to conclude, I think we need to take a more active role in making our own fates. We keep hearing from, in our reports, we get these demographers, and they kind of project a toxic mix of decline plus sprawl. I think our district has so much more potential than that. And I think it's up to us working together smartly to make a great future and to kind of seize it away from this demographic inevitability. My feeling is if we want to be good ancestors, and I think we do, we need to think and we need to act and we need to be bold. And I'll thank you for my 10 minutes of time. Thanks very much.
Donald, thank you for that. And you were pretty close to the 10 minutes, even with your technology difficulties. So again, thank you. There were a couple of points in there. You raised 3 waters as an issue. I think that you probably pricked all elected members' ears up at that point. And also just encouraging us to aim higher as a different district. So I'm just going to open the floor up. Councillor Foy has a question.
Kia ora, thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I love your language there. I was, I'm more focused there on the planning terms there, like NIMBYism and infill development. The atom stuff was a bit over, bit over the top of my head. I'm not a scientist. Sorry, I'll apologise in advance for that. But I have read your presentation and I find it really interesting, particularly on page 6 at the bottom of the page, and I'll read you one of these sentences. We need to invest in growing Kerikeri and its immediate surrounds and not starve that investment by chasing futility. And then the wealth and income that a modern, smartly grown Kerikeri city will generate can fund improved well-being for the entire district. So I thought that was, something that we haven't really talked about as a council. And, should we have all the ratepayers paying to just develop one area? Or should maybe we split into different areas that rates, different councils, so that we're about Kerikeri City is one area and the rest of the northern area is one area. I think that maybe the FN 2100, particularly with infill development, as you said, to have all those positive effects, which can only happen within a developed, intensive urban centre, it's going to cost a lot of money. And it's going to need that required infrastructure. And you're right about the sprawl, and that's because of the open rules and the rural production zone and the lack of investment in infrastructure. I think that it's going to take a lot of infrastructure to even sort out the current situation in terms of infilling that. So I don't know if you had any feedback on that statement there on page 6, Donald, and I'm right there with you with the infill, and I put on the chat about the MPS for urban development and new RMA, and it's weighting towards new development and therefore less weighting there for NIMBYism, because it's always someone's backyard.
Mm-hmm. I guess my thinking is that I'm really trying to look at 2100, and like I said, it's alien, okay? We don't necessarily we can't look at it exactly the same way we're looking at 2020 or even the 2030, 2035. I think what is going to happen is we're going to find, especially in the regions of New Zealand, that we have way more land than we need, and it's spread out way further than we really want it to be. And I have this wild guess. Actually, we're already seeing it right here where I live on our farm. We don't know what to do with our property, and we don't think sheep and beef is the future. I have this wild guess that we are going to wind up doing something I'll call rewilding of much of the far north between now and 2100. We are going to bring back the forests. We're going to bring back the kiwis. I think we're going to bring back the moa, to be perfectly honest. We're going to do it from old DNA samples and that sort of thing, and it's going to be freaking awesome, okay? Now, I understand, Felicity, that if you live in Kaitaia, you're saying, hold on a minute, am I just this little city in the midst of the forest? And honestly, I don't know, but I think that bigger thought, which is that we will have more land than we know what to do with, because we're going to learn to make food in a far, far more concentrated way with far less environmental impact, means that it's actually in some ways good. It means that where we do industry and the work. And that's why I think even starting now with things that people are just cross as can be about, like, having art be part of what gets funded by government. I think that those sorts of things are actually going to be much more important. And I understand how it's painful now, but 2100 is alien, and we need to make the start, I think, on the things that I was talking about, which is participating in the innovation economy. We got to go hard and go early, or we're going to be left behind. So that may not have answered your question very well, but I think we're going to
No, I think it's really interesting discussion. And what I found interesting in the Section 35 review of the district plan was that Doubtless Bay was actually the fastest growing area in terms of residential urban infill. So it's not Kerikeri. So I think that's probably good when we look at the statistics of our built environment. And I think with the high cost of land in Kerikeri, we're going to see a move in where people can actually afford to buy. And that may change the land use patterns that are currently in place today. So I think that needs to be aware as well.
Exactly. Like I said, I think, so the document you have was written from an Our Kerikeri, a Vision Kerikeri perspective. My personal perspective, because I'm not here today on their behalf, is that it may well be that Kerikeri is too built up, too few corridors are left to do what you might want to do. All the land is kind of spoken for in a way that doesn't allow for it to be shifted or retrofitted very quickly and very easily. And maybe you start somewhere else. And I'll probably tick off some Kerikeri people when I say that. But I just think you got to take the long, big view of where it's all headed.
Kia ora, Donald. Thank you for that question, Felicity. I think you've laid down a fair few wero for our elected members here today, and there's definitely some food for thought points in there. I love the challenge of to us to be good ancestors. I had never thought of it that simply before, so that's something that's probably going to go on my pin board going forward. So thank you for that.
Actually,
Oh, we've lost you there, but
the woman who wrote the Donut Economy book.
Very good food for thought. Thank you. And we will discuss this as a committee later on and how we want to look to progress any of your points of thought there. So again, thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us on our YouTube channel as well, and being brave and bold in your statements. At this point, we're going to move on to Melanie Chandler-Winters and Hinu from Creative Northland, who are going to speak to us about an arts and culture strategy.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Absolutely, thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Kia ora, and wonderful opportunity, Rachel, to present. This has been quite exciting and taken quite some time, but really has been a next step to really when I was working at the Turner Centre and working with a number of our creative people throughout Northland, which is incredible. And that's not only just people that were coming into the Turner Centre, but very much the whole of the far north. So that was artists to photographers to painters to IT people to creative people. And you can see probably if Kim could actually bring up that briefing paper, and I will speak very briefly, and I'm going to hand over to Hinu. I know we've had meetings with yourself, Rachel, and also I've had some great debates and conversation with Hinu, and I'm going to hand over to her because it has been a time that this has been a lot of work that's been done by Creative Northland and a lot of work that's been happening for over many, many, many years. And I've been pushing that barrow and really excited that we get this opportunity to talk to you all today. And you can actually see from that briefing paper, it's really about how we can talk about how important that the far north creative industry is to our region. All the briefing papers will give you a little bit of an insight into really how the economy is being very much supported by a great part of the creative sector in far north, and I really have felt that and felt passionate about it. So it is really a joy for me. We've actually put in a number of papers in there, not only just covering realising our creative community, but also we've put in, of course, about the regional arts and culture strategy that has been done for all of Northland, and really hoping that Far North working with you as a council, we can dovetail into all of the great work that's already been done. We've also put in the Whangarei district plan insofar as strategic arts and culture, and we've also put in Creative New Zealand supporting your community through the COVID-19, which really has hit us quite hard, the creative sector. But I believe there's a way forward. We're a great industry, and I think something that's really needed in these particular times, especially for the health and well-being of our community. So I'm myself and Hinu are here and passionate, and I'm going to really hand over to Hinu to take this further in reference to other things that we know that she has been doing in Northland as well. So my full support with her.
Thanks, Melanie. Tēnā koutou katoa. Excuse me, a bit of frog in the throat on this morning. So you'll see there's a number of drafting of papers that are there for you to read. One of them is the briefing paper around realising community creativity, and our role, Creative Northland, as a regional arts organisation, is to ensure the arts, culture and heritage sector in the region can flourish. We have been through a process with Whangarei District Council, because we're based down here, and there's some of you may know, some of you don't know, the history of Creative Northland has always been very Whangarei-centric, but 5 years ago the aim was that Creative Northland needed to go regional to be able to look at the creative economy in its entirety. So the key thing here is that we just done some prelim figures, which we, through COVID time, and is that the economy, just before we went into lockdown, we had some prelim figures that said the economy to Northland was worth around about 98 million. Now, how that breaks down, it's 60% of the creative economy is generated in Whangarei, 35% is generated in Far North, and then the balance in the Kaipara. So now Far North is on a trajectory path of just growth in this particular area. One of the things that Creative Northland does is that we kind of evaluate where our local, where our district councils sit, and currently where our assumptions or our rationales, because we're not here to tell you guys what to do, but to give you an example, is that Far North District Council in this area of cultural policy is very much focused on in the area of protecting historic heritage, built heritage precincts. You have policy that's around art and memorials in public places. You've got protecting historic heritage. You've got an events investment fund. And I suppose the focus from an outsider looking in on the community is that you have been very focused in that areas of events and festivals, and actually have, as a region, as a district, have the largest number of festivals delivered on an annual basis compared to Kaipara or to Whangarei for that matter. The other thing that is happening within your region is that you've got new cultural infrastructure happening, which is really exciting. And you've got over the next 3 years, or especially in the next 6 months, especially, you're going to see the Mānia footprints of Kupe Centre coming online in the Hokianga in December. You've got the Tohonongo Centre in Kawakawa coming online. You've got the Kupe Waka Centre, which is actually here now in Doubtless Bay. And of course, right up in towards Te Rerenga Wairua, you've got the Te Ara Whānui Ngāti Kuri's flight path with their cultural centre and development. Alongside that, you've got two of the most amazing cultural facilities for community in general, which is the Tuna Centre and Te Ahu Centre. You are actually far better, well placed with cultural infrastructure than compared to Whangarei and to Kaipara. Now, you know, if I do the comparative in that particular space. And when it comes to touring of shows, the Tuna Centre is high on people wanting to get to Tuna Centre. It's just the travelling costs, and certainly Te Ahu for a tiny little space that it is, gets what we call the quirky stuff of touring, especially around folk music. So there is what, now you will see that we've provided you with our regional action plan. The reason why we've gone down an action plan is because the action plan is for us to be able to work with the communities and work with council and people, whereas a strategy should be determined by the council itself. We've done this with Whangarei District Council. We went through a 20-month process with them to do all the public consultation, write the drafts, bring in Creative New Zealand, and then get the strategy adopted by council. It's the first arts and cultural strategy to be adopted by a council in Northland. Though their Whangarei district, as an example, has had arts and culture policy, none of our councils in Northland have arts and culture policies. There are a number of plans, as I've discussed, around heritage, around operationals and that, but not arts and culture strategies. So what's the benefit of investing in arts and culture? Well, it's about healthy and happy people. It's about creating cohesive communities. It's about benefits for local economies, which is including creation of employment and tourism opportunities. It's about growing people's knowledge. And the final one, it's about creating vibrant towns and cities. Now, within the Far North District, you've got 3 very defined areas, each one of them having commonalities and similarities, but quite blatant differences. The East Coast is far more populated than the West Coast side, and yet, as we see with our cycleways coming in, recreation, that has a huge impact on our cultural development within the Far North region. So anyway, that's a bit of a picture for you. So as you all know, culture has been put back into the Local Government Act around the 4 wellbeings, and so councils require good cultural policy. Just recently, you may have received councillors through your community offices. A document from Creative New Zealand was about a guidance around local authorities to do with the creative community, especially through this COVID time. And that really sets the basis, I think, for how you work with your creative community, how you work with us as a regional organisation. To put my hand on the heart, what I would love is for us to be able to work with Far North District Council and the community development team here to actually create a strategy for arts and culture. You're at the precipice of change. You require one. You require good culture policy that's up and beyond what your current policies. If I was to be highly critical, and is that arts and memorials and public places policy is good. Great to see that. Great to see that it was adopted on the 16th March 2017. But as we move forward, especially through this COVID time, and where we see creativity and innovation being an essential service for our communities around their own cultural wellbeing, is that then the question is, how do our local councils step up? So on that note, I will just say that arts and cultural strategies, and you'll see that we've got an action plan there. It's about linking economic and social development. It's about the improvement of physical wellbeing, which helps promote culture and stimulate economic life. It's also too is that if I listen to the previous speaker that was on here, it's about science and technology and cultural activity that strengthens nationhood, because we have a rapidly changing cultural scene. And when I consider the key arts festivals or key events that you're delivering on, they require a framework, not just an event strategy, but actually an arts, cultural and heritage policy that enables you to regulate, that enables you to facilitate and enables you to support communities' creative endeavours. Kia ora mai tātou.
Kia ora, Hanu. Fantastic presentation. Thank you. And kia ora, Melanie, for joining us. I haven't had any indication of any questions, but opening to members, are there any questions or comments that anyone would like to make? I know that, apologies, we've all had some connection issues through your presentation. I got kicked off for a moment.
I'm so sorry.
No, it was only for a few seconds, so it's all good. Councillor Tipanea.
And I was at my best as well.
Kia ora. Kia ora mai. I don't have a pātai. I just wanted to mihi to you for coming to present to this committee. I represent our council on the Far North Creative Community Scheme and my kaiako as well. So I'm looking forward to, I know that your documentation came through and I haven't actually had a chance to go through it properly. So I'm looking forward to going through there and then potentially touching base after that with any further questions or queries, but definitely tautoko. Kia ora.
Oh, kia ora, moko.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. To you.
Thank you.
Actually, Rachel, could I just add in there something about Creative Community Scheme?
Absolutely.
Oh, kia ora, thank you. So the Creative Community Scheme becomes a really important component to your creative delivery within your region, and has been operating, well, its history, which many of you may know, comes from the old arts councils days way back in the 80s, and that then there was that transition over into the Creative Community Scheme. Council delivers it. The thing that we must be careful with the Creative Community Scheme is that it's not seen to be the end all for creative people, that's the only place that they can go. Creative Community Scheme needs to be able to be interconnected with community fundings as well. And so as we find with, for example, over in the Kaipara district, their challenge for them is that the creative communities is the only way they can invest into the creative sector. So, and it's challenging them because they're smaller council, smaller budgets, is that they don't have any other resourcing to put in it. So the Creative Community Scheme should only be one pathway for investment into the arts.
Kia ora, Hanu. Very good point. Councillor Stratford would like to ask a question.
Thank you. Kia ora, Hanu. I just want to ask what the cost commitment is to have Creative New Zealand work with Council to develop our arts and what's it called, culture strategy.
Councillor Stratford, when we work with Creative New Zealand, normally it's me calling upon their resources. They don't have budget. What they have is resources. And then we have to call upon the strategy team, David Pennant, and say, David, I have a strategy that I want to do. They will come in towards the end of a strategy development, as they did with Whangarei District Council, where they will workshop with us and with those driving the strategy within the council team to workshop the strategy. So our role is to get it to a point, to a draft that can be workshopped with them so that it actually can be put into language for council to adopt. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And probably a question for Chair, Councillor Smith. Is this in our work stream? Or Daryl? Daryl's there.
Kia ora, Councillor Stratford. So no, it is not in our work stream, and we know very well that our work stream is very stretched. So it's a korero that our committee need to be having going forward, and obviously as a part of the LTP. Daryl, if you want to add anything to that, no mai haere mai.
No, I think that was a perfect answer. That's exactly what I would have said.
That fills me with confidence. Sorry.
Can I ask a further question?
Off you go.
So Hanu, we have a challenge before us. We really need an arts and culture strategy so that we can, assist our district in moving forward. But we really are strapped for the people power within our operational team to deliver this. Do you have any other suggestions on how we can achieve this?
Yeah, sure. Well, Creative Northland, that's our role, is to do the public consultation on your behalf and then being able to bring in the scribes that can actually work with us to present the results back in the finding. If I use Whangarei District Council as an example, is that we were at that particular stage still funded by, received funds from Northern Regional Council. And so we used, because it was regional, we used in that stage, in 2018, I think we had 50,000 plus GST. So we used 15,000 of that to do all the public consultation and bring in the scribes. Now, these strategies normally around about 60,000, But because we know our community, we can't do this in isolation. We can't do this without our community supporting. That's why Melanie is so important and her connections within your district. Because when you go out for public consultation, then you need to find the key people within the community that will support the gathering information. Then we're able to bring in the scribes, and the scribes are really important because they go with you. And then we bring in Creative New Zealand to support us in our delivery. We look at ways and means and leveraging because we're different. We're similar but different to, let's say, to Northland Inc., whereas that we do have operational budget to do this stuff. We do look to council to invest if they can, and we like them to invest because this is your strategy. So the key is to have the officers within council that we can work with. It's about having a clear brief from us and from you as to what you want to achieve. Then it's working with community to find the team within community, and Melanie has been working with a team of people for the last 2 years on this particular topic, so we would bring them in. We'd also look for the local person within your region to do this, because though I know Taitokoro very well, is that I don't, and though I whakapapa te Ngāti Hine, I'm not a far north girl. I enjoy the beaches and the lifestyle up there, So that's really important, to have that sort of connectivity right through, find the key people who can drive that. The other thing too is you've got a very diverse community because you've got 3 key areas that you've got to, one very heavily populated and the other 2 sides not so populated, eh? And what we see is the greatest need is up in Kaitaia. So consultation would have to take place just like you do regional consultation, 3 different areas, gathering information with key partners. Does that answer?
It does very much. Thanks, Hanu. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Fantastic question, Councillor Stratford. Thank you, and excellent answer to put it into context, Hanu. Thank you, Councillor Stratford. That raises a very good point that we are incredibly stretched, and there are plenty of things that we would love to do as a council, especially with such a vibrant team of elected members and staff at the moment. There are all the options in the world that we would like to do, so we need to figure out and get smarter about how we look to achieve these outcomes. So on that note, that brings us to the end of our deputations. I'd really like to thank all of our speakers for coming along. A key mandate for this committee is developing and maintaining relationships, and I'd like to think that we're doing a pretty good job at welcoming our community in to talk to us about what's important to them. So just acknowledging the time that they've put in. And we will now move on to item 4.1, which is confirmation of the previous minutes.
Sorry, Councillor Smith, just before we move on, there is a question from Councillor Court around the total cost to whangare.
My sincere apologies, Councillor Court. Did you want to ask that question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would be really keen to get a one-pager pitch proposal that we could consider, and if that could include the total delivered cost, if we use Whangarei as the benchmark, and what kind of resources that they would be looking to the Far North District to supply. And then if that could go to Sean, then he could provide staff feedback for consideration at a future strategy committee. Thank you.
Well, kia ora, Councillor Court. That's very kind of you. We can certainly do that, Melanie and I. So kia ora. And may I just say thank you very much for the opportunity to kōrero with you today. It's been really very privileged to be able to come here with Melanie and have this kōrero. So thank you for listening, eh? It's been great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ka kite.
Ka kite.
So item 4.1, confirmation of previous minutes. Would somebody like to move the minutes, please?
I'll move.
Thank you, Your Worship. And a seconder?
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Te Penia. Have I got any comments or questions around those minutes?
Madam Chair, I put a question on the chat just before
thank you, Councillor.
Well, just I don't have any issues about the minutes.
No, just for clarification, I sent an email this morning. So the intention for our committee this morning is that we'll close the meeting and then we'll just have a brief workshop with members as to whether or not there are any points that we'd like to progress in an informal conversation. Ka pai?
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
I just noticed I wasn't present at that meeting, so I can't actually move the minutes. I can second them, but I'm not formally allowed to move them.
I'll move. We'll switch places.
And I'll second. Right.
Hello.
Thank you.
Hi.
Thank you for that.
Yes.
Just a reminder for muting.
Closing down, turning off all of my...
Melanie, I think you need to mute. Thank you. So we'll put it to the vote. Tim, can we get the voting up, please? Thank you. Councillor Clendon?
Yes, that's fine.
Councillor Court?
That's in favour. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Foy?
Support.
Councillor Vucic? Member Ward? Maybe we're having some connectivity.
Yes, Rachel. No, sorry, just muted. Sorry.
No problems. Thank you. For perhaps Councillor Vucic will mark him as an abstention. He may have dropped out again. That is carried. Thank you. So that brings us to the end of our formal committee meeting. As I mentioned, we will move into a brief workshop just to discuss what we've had presented to us today. Daryl, your team are more than welcome to stay on for that. I'm looking for it to only be about 20 minutes or so, but it's up to them as to who would like to stay on. So on that, I will close us with a karakia. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa ponamu te moana, hei huarahi mā tātou e te rangi nei, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou e tātou katoa. Hui e, tā ki e.
Yay.
All right, everybody.